All right, we're going to call to order the July 16th meeting of the West Sacramento City Council, Redevelopment Successor Agency, and Financing Authority. We're going to begin tonight, as we do each week, with the Pledge of Allegiance. I cannot see anybody with all this paraphernalia. For a second. So tonight we're inviting our guests to join the council and staff in the pledge, which is going to be led by Ms. Justine Jimenez. The council did meet in closed session this evening to confer with our real property negotiator regarding negotiations with Caltrans over the Tower Bridge and to conduct our evaluation of the city manager. No action was taken on either item. So with that, we're going to proceed to item 1A, which is presentations by the public on matters not on the agenda but within the jurisdiction of the City Council. As is noted on our agenda, the Council is prohibited by state law from taking action or actually even having a discussion of anything that's brought up under item 1A, but it is an important opportunity for public comment. We do ask that anyone wishing to address the Council on this or any other agenda item this evening to please fill out one of the yellow cards that's available at the front door and turn it in to the City Clerk. In front of the clerk is a timer that we use to make sure that everybody gets a chance to be heard, and so to that end we ask that all comments be limited to no more than 3 minutes. Also in front of the clerk is a flip chart, and that flipboard simply indicates which agenda item we're currently discussing, because sometimes you can't tell by listening to what we're saying. We recognize also for some folks speaking in public can cause some anxiety, some discomfort, hives, and so we ask that there not be any boos or catcalls or even applause or other demonstrations. That we try to maintain a civil discourse in the chambers. For the speaking requests, we take the cards all the way up to the conclusion of the staff report on an agenda item. So, for example, if you're here and you want to speak on, in order to speak on agenda item 15, you just want to make sure you turn the card in before the staff presentation at the podium is complete. Once the council questions and the public testimony has begun, we don't take any additional speaking requests. So if you already know you want to speak on an agenda item at the meeting, please fill out the card as soon as you can, but certainly before the end of the staff report. So with that, we have quite a few requests to speak under item 1A, and the first is by Susan Atkinson. Can you see the green light on at the base of the microphone? To confirm that the microphone is currently live.
How's that? Can you? Oh,
perfect.
There, you can hear me now. I'll try to keep my volume low because I tend to get a little excited. Good evening. My name is Susan Atkinson, and I have been a proud homeowner and resident of West Sacramento, and more specifically, the Southport District for the last 30 years. I retired from my 27-year career as a real estate appraiser with Bank of America, looking forward to spending my remaining time enjoying a safe and secure life of leisure at home, enjoying the sunsets and cool evening Delta breezes. I have witnessed and been supportive of the transition of West Sacramento from a small, unincorporated community, with Jefferson Boulevard being only a 2-lane access road, construction of the Palmadesi Bridge, through the stigma and redevelopment of the Broad District, the Bright Blight, and to incorporation and birth of cityhood. I have watched this city grow, improve its access, services, retail base, business, professional, industrial, and more importantly, its phenomenal residential growth. Through all this time, I believed and trusted our city government to approve developments that protect and improve our quality of life, create a safe environment, protect property values, and to do no harm. I cannot stand before you tonight and say I still have those beliefs. What happened? Approximately 1 month ago, I returned from an outing, turned onto Claudia Court, my street, and before me, at the end of the quiet, private cul-de-sac I had known for 30 years, directly behind and bordering the 3 homes adjacent to the canal to the west, there loomed a very large, ugly, intrusive wall of concrete. I stopped dead in my tracks. My initial response was, "Oh my God, what the hell is that?" I have photos I would like you to view. I have submitted them to Chris. They are up there. And that dark shadow that you see back behind, that is the wall looming over our homes. After taking a moment to compose myself, I realized it was the rear of the warehouse building being constructed within the Southport Industrial Park. Why didn't I know this was coming? Per a recent conversation with Michelle Azevedo of Ridge Capital, Inc., the rear wall is 36 foot tall and is placed approximately 120 to 140 feet from the residential property lines for this and adjacent subdivisions bordering the canal to the west. It spans a 3-block area from Sharon Court to the north and continuing to Renee Court to the south. I queried my neighbors and discovered I was not the only homeowner who was uninformed as to the nature of this construction. In fact, I couldn't find one neighbor who knew this was going to happen. After further inquiry, I discovered this is only the first of 3 similar buildings planned for construction immediately. Is that my time?
It is.
That's been 3 minutes?
Yes.
Really? Oh, well, gee, that's too bad.
Do you have the in writing by chance as well, or could?
Pardon me?
Do you have your comments?
I have my statement. Could I submit a
Please
copy?
do. Yes.
All right. Thank you. You just quickly, the residents would like to request a meeting so we can talk about it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Who should I give this to?
The city clerk. Thank you very much, Ms. Atkinson. Bill Lowell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. William Lowell, West Sacramento, for the record. And I'm still wondering when we're going to reopen that snack bar across the street. And when it does get open, I once again hope we have a soft drink choice containing neither sugar nor caffeine. And finally, I think we should resume selling monthly bus passes over here on this side of the river. But until then, why, most will probably do like I do and get mine over at 13th and R at the light rail station. So, meanwhile, we'll let the next person speak. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Lowell. Don Johnson.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. My name is Don Johnson. I live on Burroughs Avenue in West Sacramento in the Southport area. And I'm here tonight. I want to bring to your attention a special event that has been, I don't know if it's actually been approved yet, but it's planned for this weekend. It's called the Great Horror Campout. It's taking place along Burroughs Avenue, and while this is an agricultural area, it is really a neighborhood with homes that line Burroughs Avenue down there. This Great Horror Campout is basically, it's a horror show on steroids where there's going to be several hundred people with loudspeakers camping there all night long, going through some regiment routine. And my concern here is that I found out about it this afternoon. There was no notice to any, it's not in compliant with the agricultural zoning. There was no notice to myself or anybody that I've talked to on the street regarding the event. Apparently a special use permit is yet to be issued, yet they're setting up and they're going to operate this weekend. And my understanding is that the special use permit requirements here in West Sacramento require at least 45-day prior notice, prior application, and then notification of the residents along the area. That has not happened. Okay, so I'm a little upset about the fact that we're going to have several hundred people camping out there across from our homes all night long with loudspeakers going off, participating in events that are sketchy at best. And I want to describe that to you a little bit. If you go to their website, this isn't just a little haunted house, okay? This isn't even a haunted house on steroids. This is really something where they practice bondage. There's satanic rituals, according to their webpage. This is what they run people through all night long in doing this. It's not something that's a community-based, healthy, family-friendly event. I've lived in the city since it was incorporated, and this city has taken a lot of effort over the years to get rid of adult bookstores, to get rid of prostitution, to get rid of gambling. I don't think you want to start allowing events such as this of just popping up just because there's a field in the Southport area. So I request that you examine that special use permit if it's been issued. I request that you give consideration to deny that special use permit because it was not handled properly and it's not consistent with the use in that area. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Tricia Fox?
Hi. So I'm just going to speak about the permitting, and then Melissa Meyer will then speak about the event. We first actually were scheduled to be at Gibson Ranch in Sacramento, and unfortunately, because due to a fire, burned down the pasture where we were going to be, we had to immediately move locations or lose our event. So luckily, David Vieira opened his farm to us, and this was in June, and so we were at a scramble, and immediately I was told to contact all of the different departments in West Sacramento, and I did so. I spoke to each individual, and to my knowledge, to this day, I've been in compliance with all of the different procedures that we need to do to obtain our special use permit. And tomorrow we have inspections from fire, also from building and safety and police. So to my knowledge, we are following the guidelines that were given to us.
Okay. Thank you. Kimber Goddard?
Hello, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. I've been around a while too here, watching myself get older, and some of you as well, and I've never seen anything like this in the city of West Sacramento. This is news. So my question would be, why are we doing this? I am one of 9 residents there on Burroughs Avenue who contacted one another. We're just surprised in the last couple of days that this place that now looks like a refugee camp is being built for up to 2,000 people, it says in the application. It's not going to be that many, but that's pretty huge to grant. Understand that the police chief grants these special event permits in this city and that they can take place on top of any type of zoning, according to the city. I don't believe that's a constitutionally correct principle, but or a proper land use principle for that matter. But in any case, you've apparently allowed or are going to allow this to take place up against a lot of neighbors. In a field that's going to have light, elevated sound on towers. There's security there, but what kind of people are we going to attract to this? I thought it was interesting. I spoke with Mr. Vieira. He didn't seem to understand what was going on, so I looked at a YouTube video of the last one. And here I see a picture, I can show you the site, of individuals dressed in witch-like costumes birthing apparently a baby, cutting off the baby's penis and throwing it to screaming teenagers with bloody hands. And I'm wondering what that has to do with building any type of morality or character in this community, and why on earth we would have granted something like this. The focus of this is profit, right? That's why the event coordinator, a very multi-billionaire guy, apparently puts these together. With respect to the permitting process, my investigation after talking to everybody in the city again today, and the Police Department, Planning Commission, and Assistant and City Manager to boot, tells me that the 30 or the 45-day municipal code period for getting a permit to do something like this is supposed to be done early on. It's been 30 days, so this was granted, if it is granted, without proper notice. The police chief is supposed to notify the residents. That didn't happen. The applicant didn't notify the residents. The landowner didn't notify the residents. The residents got notified by surprise by a bunch of moving vans and semi-trucks and horror things being set up across the street in a field with many, many tents, and not much that we would like to see in an agricultural A1 area. I'm not sure the traffic study is the only thing I can see is holding this up. Somewhere this permit process is still stuck in the city. I don't know. No one will tell me where, but I guess it's traffic because that hasn't been taken care of. But it's a public nuisance, a sound and light nuisance. It's all night. It possibly looks like 2 days. I can't tell from the application, but it looks like July 18th and 19th from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. So I don't know. We don't know. That's what we don't know, is what exactly is going on. I spoke with the applicant. They're very nice, wonderful girls. I don't understand why, though, we would even think about allowing this kind of a use. And if that doesn't work, there's some diesel generators there too that you should look at. But the rest of this is just, it's just ghastly. There's no sense in this. I'm not sure why it happened. But I hope you'll reconsider and not grant the use permit. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Melissa Meyer?
Hi, you guys. My name is Melissa Meyer. I'm the CEO of 1031 Productions. We are a Los Angeles-based live event company. We've been in operation for the last 6 years. If you look at any of our history, we have 0 complaints. We've actually sent into Marquez letters of recommendation from previous lands that we have used with 0 issues in the past. We take our company very seriously. We take the safety of everybody around very seriously. I'm going to just rewind really quickly to let you guys know what this event really is. The content of our event, it's an interactive haunted camping experience. We take creepy, horror, haunting allure and turn those scary movies into an actual event. There's definitely some misconstrued ideas as to what it is right now. I can assure you that there's no bondage. Perhaps they're seeing a pillowcase. We put pillowcases on campers' heads, lead them into a different area, and take it off, and they're separated from their group, and now they have to find their way back. There's no satanic rituals. We have a dance. We call it our little voodoo dance. We have 5 trained professional dancers. It's choreographed. There's actually nothing very sacrificial going on there. They dance. No bondage, like I said. Also, just to address the baby penis thing, because we don't take things that far, it was an umbilical cord. They were cutting the umbilical cord of the baby. Other things, no light is actually used at all during this event. Our sound is lower. 85 decibels is the sound that is used when you're inside of a car, the sound of traffic. Our decibel system is actually lower than that. We don't have DJ music all night long. Literally, it's just a speaker system that our headmaster makes announcements through the night. He says, campers, can you please report to the bunk checks? Everybody to their tents. We are going to do an inspection. He gives them directions all night long as to which areas to head to. As far as the sound goes, with this particular event, if we do cut all of those announcements throughout the night, we lose our entire event. We don't have it. So that is something that just really cannot happen. I've actually already spoken to the gentleman. We have 3 speaker towers. We've positioned them as far away as we can to safely be able to still give instructions to our campers. And we're going to position them away from the road so that it's into the wind. We have a nice wind flow pulling all of the sound away from all of the residents and into the field that we're using. As far as not being notified, that's something that I do apologize for. That was something that Mark Marquez had wanted Dave Vieira to do, to just tell the neighbors. I believe there's maybe 6 houses up and down there. When we first arrived on site, we went around personally in our little golf carts to hand out our business cards so that they could talk to us about any complaints. There were a couple people that weren't home, so we actually went back again today to try and do that. I think that's my time.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, you guys.
And Dr. Linda Copeland.
Mayor and councilmen,
Copeland,
I want...
There's a button right to your right that'll bring the microphone closer to you, so that
Okay.
particularly so the folks at home can hear you clearly.
Can you all hear?
Yes.
So I'm Dr. Linda Copeland. I'm a pediatrician, and my husband is a child psychiatrist. We live on Burroughs Avenue. Melissa Myers, I don't think gave truthful history. The website for the Great Horror Campout, I'll read directly from the website, which you can look up online. During Great Horror Campout, you may be forcibly handled, moved, bound, hooded, chained, and subjected to stimulated torture by our actors. This is I'm already launching a complaint against their company because this has already harmed me. Acquaintances that I knew, I didn't know them really well, but they were the elderly parents of a dear friend of my sister's, and we've known them for many years. And they were recently, this older couple, were brutally tortured and murdered in Davis. And I'm still grieving over that. And this was by a deranged young person who went to horror events. And so to have this come to my street, I have already been harmed by it. And I'm launching a complaint, and I am asking that the police chief, not issue this special use permit. As a developmental behavioral pediatrician, I know that participation in these kind of events, while it doesn't harm some people, harm others. I'm an autism expert. We have an epidemic increase in autism. And if a high-functioning autistic individual who had some interest in these kind of activities were to attend this, it would be harmful to them. And my husband as a psychiatrist, myself as a pediatrician, I've had to deal with children who've been abused, brain damaged, killed, and I've had to testify in court. And my husband as a psychiatrist has to deal with psychopathic individuals. 15 years ago, we bought our home on Burroughs Avenue. That's our sanctuary. That's where we get away from all the horror that we see within our work. And I've told my husband many times, this is so peaceful. This is our paradise. And I feel like I've been validated. I've been violated, and our sanctuary has been violated already just by even an attempt to bring this kind of event, which I know is harmful to a certain segment of our population. And I don't think that the 1031 company has done adequate screening of who should attend this event. They say from 18 on up, and they say if you're pregnant or have seizures or have a back injury or you're prone to fear and anxiety, don't attend. If you attend, it's at your own risk. But they are not experts in mental health issues. And while this kind of participation in this event may not harm one individual, somebody who's prone to psychopathology, it can just further aggravate the psychopathology. And they do note on their website they can interfere with the people's sleep. Thank you.
All right, so those are all the comments we have under item 1A. Mr. Turtle, if I could turn to you on this last issue, if you have any status report on the permit request or any of the other matters. I know several.
Well, Mr. Mayor and Council, police, fire, and our code enforcement staff have been working on this issue. It's my understanding that the issues in terms of security, the issue of alcohol have been addressed. Issue of ADA parking has been addressed. The permit is in progress, and there's no basis at this moment to deny it.
Mr. Christoph, did you have were you?
Oh.
I thought you were adjusting your microphone. Okay. All right. And on the Southport Business Park item that was also brought up?
Yes. We have met with Ridge Capital several weeks ago and asked Ridge Capital to meet with the neighbors. They have done so. It's my understanding that the mitigations to the building in terms of the color of the building, the landscaping with trees, the sound wall have addressed the neighbors' concerns. The new building will serve as a sound buffer for the existing businesses in the internal part of the business park, as well as the ones that will come. So from a standpoint of design, it has been designed to be a buffer for noise for the current and future businesses in the park.
And the event, back to the Great Horror Campout, that event's this weekend. So it's permits issued by the chief of police are appealable by the applicant. But that would have to, but not as far as I can tell from the municipal code. They're not otherwise appealable, or they're appealable under some general provision.
They would not otherwise be appealable.
All right, but even if they were, because the event is on this weekend, or it's tomorrow. Is it tomorrow? I'm sorry, on Friday, beginning on Friday. So the permit, if it is ultimately issued by the chief of police, that'll be the final determination that's made.
Yes.
Is that correct, City Attorney? Okay. All right. I mean, in both instances, I think that there's no actions that are available to the council on either of these issues to be taken. The first one on the Southport Business Park, I think the city manager has identified some of the reasons why the specifics of that parcel have been dealt with. That piece of property, I think the Southport Industrial, what was once the Southport Industrial Park, and it's just ironic that Mr. Goddard is here tonight, but what once was the Southport Industrial Park, that is now the Southport Business Park was a project originally approved by the county and then ultimately adopted into the city's general plan, but dramatically modified as that occurred. The Southport Industrial Park, when the neighborhoods around that Linden half circle were built, the Southport Industrial Park had been approved for pretty intensive, heavy, smokestack industry essentially. And there was a deep civic debate in our community about whether that was appropriate, and ultimately an initiative by that the voters considered, and the voters elected not to make a sweeping policy change around industrial development in Southport. However, the city as a whole that also then made some pretty significant changes to the underlying development and zoning expectations in that area. That's when it became the Southport Business Park. So no longer would a massive newspaper recycling plant, as an example, or some other large smokestack industry be built there. That was the I was going to say the compromise, but no, it was the evolution of the community standards around industry. There was then another voter initiative later that was also rejected, but by a larger margin, that also intended to reduce or remove industrial development in Southport, which, as I said, the voters also rejected. And the Southport Business Park zoning and general plan designations were changed during that period as well to soften them even more. And so there's been a long history and an expectation that property would be developed for industrial purposes, really all the way back to before incorporation. And since the city has existed, has taken progressive steps to modify downward the intensity of industrial development that can occur. But because low intensity industrial development, business park development is still allowed, the city council, way back then, I don't even know if I was here then, I know Mr. Christoph was, but the city council insisted that if we're going to have any of these uses here, that there has to be appropriate screening and setbacks and sound walls and that sort of thing. And so as far as I know, that's where most of the rules, the regulations and rules to which the property owner is responding relate to those requirements that are imposed in order to protect the neighborhood from uses that would be occurring in the business park. The only reason it hasn't been a live issue is there hasn't been any development happening for many years. But the issue, the underlying issue, has been heavily debated in the community, maybe more so than anything else other than riverboat gambling in the 1980s. It's been a very heavily debated issue in the city, and so this and the other topic that has been raised tonight, I think, in some sense, are both examples. We don't, especially at the council, but this is also true in City Hall generally. We don't have the constitutional authority to simply assess each thing as it comes through our door at the moment and make a discretionary decision, do we like this or not? I see some folks in the audience that didn't want McDonald's in the location that it's at either, and frankly, I don't eat at McDonald's. I don't like horror movies. I mean, there's a lot of things I don't like either. But we don't have the authority. Once we set the rules of the game, you can build somewhere to eat. You can build somewhere to eat here. You can have a place for farming and events here. We don't have the authority to say after the fact, oh no, but we didn't mean that. We didn't mean that. That's not allowed under our constitutional system of government. Government doesn't have the capricious authority, the arbitrary authority to change its mind at a moment's notice. And so that's always an issue that we're grappling with. The rules of the game have to be stated clearly and consistently and stably and applied equally across the board to everyone in advance. And so in this case, in the case of the horror camp out, the procedures that the chief of police must follow are the procedures that the chief of police must follow. We have no authority legally to intervene, and we don't have the ability to simply say we like it if it's a spring harvest celebration, but we don't like it if it's about horror. That's a content regulation which is beyond our authority. Now, our ability to regulate the intensity of use, the loudness of use, the traffic, many of the other issues that were raised that aren't really about the content of the activity, but more about the impacts. We'd have the authority to regulate that, but we can't regulate it after the fact or once the permit essentially has already been applied for. So I don't know in terms of, there's nothing that the council can do about this either legally or otherwise this evening. I think we've heard some important issues that should guide how we approach special events generally and perhaps special events at this property in the future. But in terms of an action that we might be able to just simply take out of the blue tonight in anticipation of an event that's scheduled for Saturday, that's not within our legal authority. So. Yes, Mr. Ledesma.
Thank you. Mr. City Manager, there on both of these items that were brought up tonight on the camp out and the building in the industrial park they were brought up about noticing procedures, whether they were followed or not. I'm just going to ask if you could follow up with staff and find out if there was indeed noticing requirements of the permitting process and on the industrial park, if indeed those did get out. If you can follow up with us by memo or otherwise, because I know those are important points for the community to make sure those things are going out and the community has an opportunity to respond. So, thank you.
All right, thank you, and thanks for those. I know this is always unsatisfying, and usually folks only come to the city council meeting at the moment of the immediate crisis, and we are not legally allowed to respond in that way. But the issues and the concerns and the passion is definitely heard, and to the extent that it can inform future policies, that can be heard. We simply can't. We cannot take instant and arbitrary action without any sort of public notice or other legal instrument to do so. All right. With that, we're going to proceed to item 1B, which is council communications. Are there reports or other communications this evening? Mayor Pro Tem Johannesson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The 10-year Plan Commission met on June 19th, and we really just had an update from the homeless coordinator on the continuing activities. On June 19th, Yolo County Housing met. Again, it was more a meeting of presentations. This meeting, we listened to a presentation of the AARP Tax Aid Program that happened at Riverbend Manor. On June 26th, the Westside Housing Development Corporation met. A couple of issues there I think are important. We're probably going to talk about a little bit about the water policy. The Development Corporation did accept the offer of the city to free installation of a water flow or low flow shower heads and toilets for Washington Courtyard, Evergreen, and Cummins and Pecan, which is great asset for the renters in these places. And also, our director has been authorized to proceed with an urban farming agreement for the vacant land at Cummins Road across from Elk Ridge Village School. That's going to be in participation with the school and products. And the garden will be available to the residents at Cummins Road, so this will be a follow-up to the urban garden that we have just installed. And then finally, on July 8th, the Yolo County Air Quality Management District met. And again, it was a meeting of reviews of different programs. We heard a review of the district's normal permitting process and also a review of the district's tax toxics program.
Councilmember Sandine.
Thank you, Mayor Cabaldon. On June 23rd, there was a special meeting of the Water Resources Association of Yolo County. In addition to a number of consent items on budget and other ministerial matters, we also adopted a resolution in support of the Association of California Water Agencies statewide water action plan. And then earlier this evening, the Up for West Sacramento Executive Board met, and I think you'll be sharing some news that I won't eclipse at the moment, but we also heard great news about the kindergarten cohort study, and there will be more to come on that to our council as well as to the First Five Commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kristoff.
Yeah, a couple, Mr. Mayor. The Flood JPA met last week, and one of the major issues that we discussed, and that was some properties were improperly assessed a number of years ago. And we can only go back 6 years to collect or to give back or whatever. But we've caught it now, and so now there are going to be some readjustments. And I just wanted to alert the council that we may hear about it. And we are doing an outreach. We are sending letters to the various property owners and all of the people that are in essence affected. So we will try to deflect this as much as we possibly can, but at the same time, we need to get back up to what the proper charges should have been. And then LAFCO met a week ago, and we discussed the shared services agreements that LAFCO is wrestling with right now. And we have set up a workshop to help clarify the issues. It looks like we may pick and choose the issues that we deal with as far as shared services go, but at the same time, we are going to look at what we can do, what we can help with, look at it from an economy of scale, look at it from just good public policy, and hopefully we will come up with those and resolve some of those issues. But I'll be getting back with the council as soon as we do.
All right, thank you. I have a couple. The city hosted the Central Valley Flood Protection Board. It's the state board that is responsible for the state plan of flood protection. So we hosted them at City Hall here earlier this week. Was it last week? I don't even remember. Recently, within the last several days, for their formal meeting, and then also we took them on a tour of some of the central levee projects in our city, and they also visited one across the river as well. I thought it was a great session, but that board is very well aware of our projects. They've been a key partner, and I think the presentation that they gave, something like 70% of the assets that the state protects with its flood system are in the lower Sacramento stretch, which is where we are. We're actually the center of that stretch, and so it's a high priority for the state. And it was great to have those issues framed from a West Sacramento perspective, and our team did a fantastic job both in supporting the meeting and conveying a real West Sacramento welcome, but also the seriousness and the importance of the flood protection projects that we have underway in partnership with the board, but also with DWR and the Corps. Earlier in the week, Mr. Ledesma and I attended the Chancellor Katahi's regional dinner at her official residence in Davis, where the topic was the third campus of UC Davis and the World Food Center. And Mr. Ledesma may have something he wants to add or contradict, but I think one of the key takeaways was the description of the third campus, which I think has followed the discussion that the Chancellor launched that several of us were participating in here at City Hall in West Sacramento a year and a half ago. The third campus notion draws from the World Food Center idea that she had launched. And she described that with more clarity on Monday night around the existing Davis campus being the focus for basic research at the university, the Oak Park, or she called it the South Sacramento site, the campus being the focus of medical and health, and that the third campus would have a particular focus on food and sustainability and wellness and other related disciplines, but in an applied sense and in an integrated sense and heavily connected to policy. So the description of it as a third campus physically distinct from the existing two campuses was, we took that as a signal around at least where the Chancellor and some of her senior leadership team are focusing their work, but also the deep connection on policy and on the full range of food-related sectors and industries. That it's not simply about farm to fork. It's not simply about restaurants and ag. It's about both of those, but it's also about food safety, food security, and a wide range of other issues. Many of which have as their locus within our region, at least West Sacramento. And then she described the importance of having really strong systems of public transit that would connect to the capital, which sounded like a streetcar to me. So I thought it was a very positive. Dinner, at least if you're on this part of Yolo County. So it was attended by most of the electeds from throughout Yolo County, as well as some of the senior nonprofit and educational leaders from the broader region as well. And then 2 weeks ago I was at the annual meeting of the United States Conference of Mayors, and it was had a lot of discussions on work on flood protection there as well, directly with the Corps of Engineers and others, also around ways to improve the CDBG program. We met with Helen Kanowski, who is the acting deputy director of the Department of Housing and Urban Development, apparently, after having been our city clerk, or maybe it's just somebody with the same name, about some opportunities there, and probably the most important part of that annual meeting was the announcement of West Sacramento as the winner of the City Livability Award, which is a gigantic honor. I mean, there are over 200 cities competed nationally for that award, and 2 cities were selected. One large city, in this case, it was the city of New Orleans, which has launched a very ambitious and so far, pretty successful program to reduce the number of homicides in their city. And then the small city winner, that is cities of under 100,000, winner was West Sacramento, with the focus on our Universal Preschool for West Sacramento program. And as part of the so we were the winner. There were 6 finalists in total. Assistant City Manager Carol Richardson was there. Justine was there from the program. Who else was there? Shauna was there from the program. It was really a fantastic moment for West Sacramento. A lot of folks in the room. Actually, do we have the video that the Conference of Mayors prepared? So this is the award-winning, award-acknowledging video from the Conference of Mayors about the program.
Who wants to go first?
The importance of preschool is not just what we feel in our gut. Children who attend high quality programs are less likely to drop out, are more likely to go on to college. They're healthier, they're happier. It just goes on and on. Having those opportunities gives children the boost they need.
West Sacramento, it's a community in transition. We're growing fast. It's a really rich, diverse place, but also a lot of challenges around economic opportunity.
Do you like jam? Yeah.
I had this crazy idea. Why don't we be one of the first cities in the country to try to develop a program that delivers universal preschool for all children in our city? We only have 600 4-year-olds. We're not talking about solving some gigantic, massive problem. We're not trying to cure polio or malaria. It's 600 kids, right? Can't we do something about that?
I like that.
The way we fund Universal Preschool for West Sacramento is a whole bunch of sources, right? Every quarter out of the couch that we can find. Lobster. The state's first 5 commission, our county, the school district, and then the business community. Partners that all saw the value here.
Okay, let's see your case.
The kids have increased pre-literacy skills, increased language skills, increased math skills, and a comfort level with education as a whole. We've now tripled the number of preschool spaces available in Yolo County for preschool programs.
How we do universal preschool across California, West Sacramento's model is really one for all of us in the state to look at. It really is what we had in mind.
Javier dice si pones uno. Pick some good ones.
Upper West Sac is such a critical part of our long-term future, both in terms of opportunities for the kids, but also the sense that for the parents.
Thank you.
This is the kind of thing that keeps us here. Building from this, we say, hey, we've got them in the school, but we also want to participate in other community activities and really make this part of his life and our life.
Some of us look like our moms.
Because preschool is not seen largely as a central function of cities, they don't get that much kudos. So the City Livability Award is a really important marker, especially for a smaller city like us, that, yeah, you are leading change, leading innovation in the country, and it's making a difference. For other mayors, you have all the DNA to make it happen. Don't wait for a $100 million grant from Mark Zuckerberg. It is possible through the kind of creativity that mayors bring to the table to really weave together all the resources that are out there so that, very soon you can have preschool for every single child in your community. Yeah, we've got some challenges in our community, but we're tackling them. We're pushing through them. And that creates a cascade effect for parents, for volunteers in the community to say, if we can figure out in our little town how to deliver preschool for every kid, what problem can't we tackle? Just the spirit of change and transformation that's kind of taken over the community. that was a video shown that the same meeting was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, George Bush, Maria Shriver. I mean, this was a high-profile recognition for West Sacramento and for the collaboration between the city and the school district and First Five and all the private providers and the parents and everyone else that makes this happen. So it was a moment of extraordinary pride for the community. So thanks to Carol and Justine, all the folks who make the program work and then work so hard to make it a reality, and to the council, because I mean, this doesn't happen in most cities because the cities don't see either the need or they're not willing to stretch a little bit on their mission, and we have had some raucous debates about it, and it's exactly and we reached the right conclusion with the right cautions and the right metrics, and we wouldn't be at this point if the council for a decade hadn't been willing to take some chances and to give a little rope to some enterprising volunteers and staffers and parents and teachers that wanted to try it and make West Sacramento something really distinctive nationally and something a really great place to live. So thank you so much to the council, the board that Councilmember Sandine chairs, the For West Sacramento board just met earlier this evening, and she can tell you how affirming this whole experience has been for all the folks who've been given so much heart and soul and blood, sweat, and tears in order to make this a reality. So congratulations.
Want to show it?
Sure. And here's the actual physical plate that Justine's been carrying around. We will be having a local celebration of this. The Waste Management is the national sponsor of the City Livability Awards with the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and they and we will be hosting a local celebration on September 29th. Thank you, Chairwoman Sandine. On September 29th, in conjunction, we expect there'll be several mayors from throughout the rest of the country that'll be here as well to put another spotlight on our community and the success of the program. So, terrific.
Can I say something? Thank you. I just want to thank all the staff members, Carol and Justine specifically, for all the work you've put into this program. It is really a shining beacon in our community. And the Livability Award has been a terrific point of pride for the community. For the week that you weren't here receiving the award, the social media just lit up with pride from our community members for this accomplishment. So thank both of you and the rest of the staff, and thanks to the mayor for representing us and for your work on this as well. And it really is something special. In fact, I will tell you, I heard about it from a family member who is in Washington, D.C., and follows Conference of Mayors, and said something. I just saw West Sacramento won a big award. And so news of us travels afar, and I want to make sure you guys are recognized for the work you do. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
I too would just make a quick comment. Kudos to you, Mr. Mayor, for guiding, in essence, sort of guiding this through. And Carol, I know, has done yeoman's work and all of the staff that she has worked with. It's taken a while to have all of the pieces, in essence, fall into place. But at the same time, this is truly it's a landmark for the city of West Sacramento. This is something that we will be able to point to for a number of years. And, hopefully we can continue to do the good things that get recognized at the national level. And I know that we have people that now know of West Sacramento, and that's huge. That's a big thing. And so I'd just like to thank everybody involved and let the public know that this is really a big thing. This is a really good thing. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kristoff. And I would also just one other thing was to point out that because we took a lot of financial risks on this from the very beginning, but one great, we hope, collateral benefit of all of the recognition and the national kudos for the program is that even in Dallas at the award ceremony, there were a lot of companies and foundations and others that were as inspired by what we're doing here as we are, and we're, you know, we will be following up with them about potential, you know, larger support to both expand and intensify the work that's happening in early learning, and also to, you know, make sure that we can continue what has been, you know, such a tremendous success. So thank you, thanks again, Mr. Christoph. All right, item 1C is boards and commission appointments. We have none of those this evening, so we're going to proceed to the consent agenda, which is items 2 through 14. And you have a memo at your desk from the city manager with some modifications to item 5. Any, Mr. Johannesson?
8.
Yes. 1, 2. All right. I actually wanted to pull 12 for a second as well. So, okay. Item 8 is consideration and award of the contract for landscape maintenance of landscape and lighting districts to Professional Landscape Solutions. Mr. Christoph.
Hi, Dina. I just wanted to know if you've had the discussions with Professional Landscape Solutions about water conservation, all of the things that are going on now because of the drought and
of course,
and all of that. So, but I just want to know if you had those discussions.
we have, and because the irrigation is actually controlled by our own staff, we're on top of that as well. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
All right, thank you. Item 9 is consideration of an update on the city's water conservation efforts. Mr. Johannesson, Mayor Pro Tem Johannesson.
Hi. So I just a couple of questions. So we've got some state emergency regulations that are coming out that are going to impose additional restrictions. Of course, the cities, it looks like they're have leeway in addressing these as well. In West Sacramento, do we have alternating watering days required yet?
At this point, it is a voluntary compliance with our Stage 2 water contingency plan. If the regulations are adopted in August, we will need to move to mandatory on that. So it would be an odd-even schedule, which requires 3 days a week maximum for watering.
Right, but has the public been notified that it's Tuesday, Wednesdays for odd numbers, or?
We do have to, yeah, we have sent out information in utility bill inserts, and we also have flyers that we distribute to residents as our staff that are out and about doing meter reads and other things, see people watering on the wrong day. And we do tell them it's voluntary at this point, but we are educating the public about that.
Okay, yeah, I think, so I guess the main question, I had a couple calls from rental owners. And and I actually had a conversation with the Rental Housing Association as well on this issue. So basically what happens if you've got an apartment complex with 50 units, we have an issue of tenants that may not necessarily want to, there's no incentive to conserve water because the bills are sent to the landowner or the landlord, and any penalties would be assessed to the landlord. So there's some concern growing that, you know, if there's more strict penalties coming out of the state, the landlords really don't have any redress. And there's a couple of things that apparently they can do. Apparently they can pass on the additional utility charge to the tenants, but then there's an issue of collection and being able to evict people for not paying those. But one of the suggestions they had was to maybe look at some incentives for putting low-flow toilets and low-flow showers in rental units. So I guess my comment is really, as we roll this out, to maybe see if we can engage rental owners to see what we can do to help them with this, because it does seem to be a significant problem. And this is not just West Sacramento, but it's statewide on how to deal with this. Because tenants, rentals tend to, you know, people come and go a little more than homes, and there may not be that incentive to save. And if you've got a household with 3 people, you know, waste is waste. So we do have this issue that it may affect disproportionately rental owners. So it's just something I'd see if maybe we can look at ways to address this.
Well, we are actually implementing a direct install program with the Regional Water Authority for low-income multifamily complexes this summer. So we have started to look into that as an issue.
Okay, but even for profit or moderate, you know.
Well, this is a grant from Prop 84 funding, so it is low income, but we do have a very small budget that was just adopted for water conservation programs, and that's one of the things we're going to evaluate is where we get the biggest bang for our buck. You know, where can we provide incentives that make the biggest difference? So that's something we look into.
Okay, it may be worthwhile to engage the local housing, rental housing people just to make sure that, you know, you get some impact there, input there.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. Ledesma?
Mr. Johannesson asked the question I was going to ask about the recent changes coming from the statewide efforts. But I would say this, you know, in looking at the month-over-month changes, the summer months have definitely impacted watering conservation efforts, I think probably from people, the dry months that people are probably watering more.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I know you're going to do more education on that. If you can just, I think that's going to be the important point is people understanding what the watering, even though it's voluntary, we can make them as much as we can public and make sure there's as much education out there as possible. I know, I think we have a demonstration at the farmers market this week on watering and
rain barrels tomorrow.
Yeah, rain. Right. Yeah, thank you. So I know that's coming up. So as much as we can do to get word out to residential, I know we're tracking by your report, tracking the largest water users, but they're all above the 20% mark. But my guess is residential units at housing is probably what's maybe not catching up to that point yet. So as much as we can do to educate them on those I guess suggested or voluntary measures would be helpful. So even if it's on the website, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
And for the recognition for the users that are achieving, you know, large reductions, you know, harsh, which is using less than half as much water, are you intending to do something more than recognizing them in our staff reports? Or
Well, there is going to be a report card letter that's sent directly to so there'll be a generic letter that each of the top 20 users will receive, and it'll list those people that are on the 20% plus reduction list. And they'll have some information about contacting the city for additional information if they want help conserving water. And I also plan on doing some additional outreach, maybe through press releases, just recognizing the city's efforts as a whole, that we are doing really well considering what the state reductions have been.
Yeah.
So I wanted to do probably press releases, website, city highlights, things of that nature.
Okay. Thank you. All right, item 12 is consideration of exclusive negotiating agreement with DNS Development for the Washington Firehouse. Diane, could you just stack the calendar out? What is this? How do these timeframes line up with each other on the deliverables?
Yes, absolutely. I'd be happy to. So during the 6-month ENA, the first things to occur will be that DNS will be engaging some consultants, architects, contractors to go into the building and evaluate that what needs to be done to bring it to a rentable condition. And within 30 days, they will be within 10 days they'll notify us of the contractors and so on that they want to use that will be going in the building, and then in I believe 90 days they have to actually submit a proposal. 30 and 60 days is primarily development concept, still thinking about restaurant, what kind of a restaurant, how much square footage, that kind of thing. Very, very general design information. I'm in section 3.4, where it kind of sets forth the design concept, the rehabilitation and renovation plan. Within 90 days, we're actually expecting a full proposal from them with more specifics, including costs and budgets, a schedule for when they believe that they'll be able to activate the building, construction timeline, and also specifics such as the restaurant tenant potentially, as well as a financing plan and development schedule. So that's 90 days. And then we have, I believe it is 30 days to review that proposal and get back to them with a thumbs up or a thumbs down as to whether we're satisfied with that, and notify them accordingly whether we feel that's consistent with our intent.
And then there's 10 more days. If we say no, then they have 10 more days to take another stab at it, right?
10 more days?
To take another stab, to resubmit a new proposal if
Yes,
okay.
yes.
But then, so what the between the development agreement and the execution of the property sale and use agreement, what's the I'm sure it's here, but what's the time frame there? If we say yes, if they submit the development proposal, we say okay, that looks good, and then the ENA expires with the execution of the property sale and use agreement. What's the anticipated schedule for moving from development proposal to from agreement on the development proposal to a property sale and use agreement?
We have to come to a property. We have to actually have a purchase agreement within the 6-month period. So we have to have that done, or this agreement will terminate. Was that your question?
Okay, so after the 90 days, but before the expiration of the 6 months, we would anticipate having a property sale and use agreement.
We would be going back and forth, and if we didn't like the first proposal, we would be refining that and working with them to revise that such that we have an acceptable proposal.
Okay, and then at the same time, do we have, I know we have an intention, and I'm certainly committed to it as well, but do we have an obligation on the concomitant efforts to find the sewer credits, the grant funds, and do we have a time frame for that side of the equation as well, or?
That will need to be developed within the purchase agreement. We will make those commitments and expressions.
So once we have the conceptual framework of a development proposal around which we could then work on those punch list items on our end of the equation.
We'll be working on those. We'll be working on quantifying those and figuring out what we can commit to during this ENA period, and then have some expression of that within the purchase and sale agreement that we will be bringing back to you for approval.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, anything else on the consent agenda? And is there a motion?
So moved.
It's been moved by Mr. Ledesma, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Johannesson. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Motion carries. Consent agenda is approved. That brings us to item 15, which is public hearing and report of Measure K and Measure B revenue and disbursements.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Nitish Sharma with City Finance Division. This is the 11th year of Measure K report presentation. One of the requirements of Measure K is to publish an annual report following a public hearing. On June 4th, staff presented a report on Measure K revenue and disbursements and an expenditure plan for fiscal year 2014 and 15. In your packet, we have included a scorecard to demonstrate how funds were allocated and spent to date from 2002 and 3, and a full report on Measure K and now Measure V, which replaces the Measure K capital portion. Measure K scorecard provides that funds are to be allocated to programs according to Council Resolution 0258, adopted in February 2003, pursuant to a guidance as approved in the Advisory Measure J. This scorecard demonstrates that staff adheres to the Council direction. As you notice, the scorecard is broken into two sections, base and capital. Base is the quarter-cent of the half-cent override, and funds are allocated on a as-needed basis. For example, an annual contribution of $250K to Yolo County Library to keep the library open 4 hours every Sunday, and $100,000 to First 5 Yellow. Some programs are spending more than the actual allocation. If you see, for example, the water rate subsidy, some programs are spending less than their allocation. As you can see, there's no funds being allocated to the light rail / streetcar operations. As noted in the report, Measure K fund is projecting an annual fund balance at the end of this fiscal year of $3 million. One of the recommendations of staff is to allocate $2.038 million to the streetcar to fully fund it through fiscal year 14. Staff is also recommended the remainder of the $1 million to be allocated to Measure K reserve fund for future council project as future project approved by council. The second part of the report is the quarter cent of the capital portion that commenced in 2003 and ended in 2013. As you can see, most of that capital were spent in early part of the year as part of the accelerated road rehab. The capital funds of Measure K allowed the city to leverage other funds. As in the report, you'll see $8.4 million where we were able to leverage approximately 35%, that is. Measure U, which is the advisory measure, and Measure V continued the quarter cent from 2013 for additional 20 years, and the proceeds of that sales tax override were to be used for streetcar system and flood improvements. The expenditures in Measure V are also included as part of the Measure K full report. We're planning to publish this report in the local newspaper on our city website, and also a copy will be available at the library and the city clerk's office. This concludes staff's presentation. I'd like to return it to you, Mr. Mayor, to open the public hearing, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Are there questions for Mr. Sharma at this time?
I do, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Christoph.
Yeah, Tish. No, Tish. The $2,038,000 that we're planning on moving over to streetcar. Why do we need to move it over now? Can't we just keep it in the fund and then when we do need it? I mean, we're not doing anything as far as streetcar goes now, but when we do need it, then slide it over?
Very good question. It's actually not moving it. We are requesting is council to give us authorization, so we'll commit that $2 million, the fund balance, and it's not, and it could be changed pursuant to council's future direction. So we're not moving anything. We're just identifying in our annual financial report that $2 million is committed for a project.
Okay. Thank you.
Question. All right. With that, we're going to open the public hearing. I don't have any requests to speak, but because this is a legal public hearing, does anyone wish to address the council on this item? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Return to the council. Any further questions or discussion or motion?
I'll move the recommended action.
Second.
Right. It's been moved by Ms. Sandine, seconded by Mr. Christoph. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Motion carries. Item 16 is a public hearing in consideration of Resolution 14-24, certifying inclusion of delinquent charge and penalties for water, sewer, and refuse services on the secured tax roll in the same manner as the general taxes, and directing that a lien also be placed on the subject properties.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Claire Connor. I'm a supervising accountant from the Finance Division of the Administrative Services Department. Finance Division handles the financial part of the utility services. At the end of each fiscal year, we rely on the annual transfer of the delinquent amounts to the property tax bill for collection. The delinquent notices were sent to all property owners have a delinquent May balance of at least $150. The total delinquent amount has been further reduced to $825,000 since this agenda report was drafted. We will continue to receive payment all the way through the end of July before preparing the final tax roll. We will make sure the final delinquent list submitted to the county is prepared most accurately. With that, I would like to return this item to you for public hearing. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Are there any questions at this time? Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing on item 16. I wish to address the council on this item. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Further questions or discussion? Or a motion?
I'll move the recommended action.
Been moved by Mr. Ledesma, seconded by Member Pro Tem Johannesson. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Thank you. All right, item 17 is a public hearing in consideration of Resolution 14-35, certifying the list of code enforcement charges, directing that a lien be placed on the subject properties, and requesting inclusion of these charges on the secure tax roll in order that they may be collected in the same manner as general taxes.
And Mr. Mayor and Council, if I may, I'd like to introduce Bill Burke, who replaced Larry Brooks to head up our code enforcement staff, and has just done a great job. He's got 23 years of code enforcement background, including 10 years at the City of Roseville. He's just a great guy to have on our staff, and I think this is the first time he's made a presentation.
All right, welcome.
Doesn't know about our jacket rule.
No, sir.
What rule is that?
Thank you, sir. Good evening, members of the council and Mr. Mayor. Before you, identified as Exhibit A, is the original list of properties that either have or had code enforcement cases that resulted in the assessment of fines and fees, which have not been paid as of last week. I'd like to bring it to council's attention that the following case numbers have recently been paid in full and should be removed from this list. CE 13-0159 for 705 Hardy Drive, and CE 13-0368 for 1144 Haverhill Street. There's also one case listed in the staff report under CE 13-1212 for 416 Glide Avenue, where the actual cost of abatement was recently paid, but staff recommends waiving the late fee. The city clerk was provided a revised Exhibit A for council's review. In every case, the property owners of record were mailed at least one written notice explaining all violations and how to comply. The notice also included a warning as to the potential fines or fees for noncompliance, a reasonable amount of time to abate the violations, and appeal rights if fees were assessed. In most cases, property owners were also mailed monthly invoices from December through May of this year that included late charges. On June 4th and July 1st, property owners were mailed tax lien warning letters. In conclusion, it is respectfully requested that you open the public hearing and take testimony on any objections to these charges. After closing the hearing, please consider adopting Resolution 14-35, including the revised Exhibit A, directing a lien be placed on these properties and request inclusion of these charges on the secured tax roll. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
All right, are there any questions at this time? All right, seeing none, we're going to open the public hearing on item 17.
Thank you.
And we have one request to speak on this by Darrell Kenworthy.
Good evening. I'm not sure what my case number is. The address is 801 Hardy Drive. I don't know what you have in front of you. Do they have a copy of the letters that I sent to you? They do not. Okay. June 11th. I said, Bill Burke, this last year has been difficult in the move forward in the house remodel because of several financial issues and the time and energy it has taken to overcome them. Number one, business loss. With an over $9,000 loss in my business, that is not, I made $9,000 less than the year before, but my net income was a minus $9,000 this last year. I lost money. It's been rough. The extra time, energy, and financial drain to manage the business has been rough. We came through it. Most of the loss was focused in the fall and winter with a turnaround this spring. Number two, wedding of our fourth daughter cost me $4,000 approximately and was paid before these difficult times hit. The cash flow was tough. Our son, DJ, who is disabled, Down's autism, COPD, G-tube fed, etc., turned 18. We need to set aside between $30,000 and $3,500 to start the costs and legal fees for conservatorship. The death of our car, we had to get a new one. The continuing charges from the city of West Sacramento on the uncompleted remodel, even at $250 a month, will take a huge chunk out of our budget, leaving much less to spend on the house and resolve the root problem, which is our unfinished house. The good news, the extra expense to the business are beginning to take effect positively, with gains being seen this spring and summer. The living room is nearly finished. The floor, the painting, the fixtures installed. My work schedule is such that I can take a full week off each month. Now it's 2 weeks a month to work on the house and still make enough money to spend money on the house and live. My wife, Donnell, has picked up part-time work at Yolo County Office of Education in the Special Ed Department. DJ now, who receives SSI, which helps a lot, also we've been able to knock the cost down of his conservatorship from over $3,000 to down to less than $1,000 because of using paralegal and not a lawyer, which has been a benefit. This has been a difficult path, and I know that we are not yet finished, but we are moving forward with positive changes that have recently taken place in our finances, in our time, and in our house, freeing up much more time to work on the house and seeing significant progress in this last month. In quickly looking over our records, we have already paid nearly $7,500 to the city in permit fees, deposits, and charges. If there's anything we can do to alleviate this last financial burden, it would be huge. Council members, just basically this. Every dollar I spend on the charges for this or a dollar I can't spend on my house.
Mr. Kenworthy, I do need to ask you to come to conclude.
Okay.
Time's expired.
I had Randy come to the house to see it again. We worked out a plan to be able to shorten what I was going to do on the house, even though I put almost $6,000 in the original fees because of the size of it.
Mr. Kenworthy, I'm going to have to call to close the time on the testimony.
Okay. All right.
So let me point out this is a hearing on the action of placing the fees on the tax roll. We're not reopening the case itself,
right?
Or conducting an appeal hearing on the imposition of the fee.
Okay.
This is a hearing and ultimately an action on whether or not the fee gets transferred. Even if we weren't to vote to transfer to the tax rolls, it's still accruing and it's still due. We're not considering a change in the actual findings of the appeal of the code enforcement officer or the appeals board in this action.
Okay. I do have some concerns. Even $700 that I have put towards it, I have not received any receipt for it. There has not been any kind of record to me that it has been received by the city. I talked to Bill Burke here. It says that somehow it got shuffled around and finally it got put in the right place, but I still have not received any kind of written notification of even the $700 that I have paid towards this.
All right.
And I'm looking at the city council and said I'm doing my best. I really am.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Kenworthy. We're going to close the public hearing and ask Mr. Burke to provide any additional information. I know you've been dealing with this particular case as well, and it has a history here. Or Randy?
As Mr. Kenworthy said, I met at the house. And the scope of the current remodel is beyond what can be completed in the time frame we've talked about. But what Mr. Kenworthy and I talked about was abbreviating the scope of the permit, which is possible, and within a short period of time, we can final, and Mr. Kenworthy can complete the work within the abbreviated permit, and then subsequent to that, the other pieces that are within the current permit would be permitted separately, new permits in finite pieces. So the house can be completed, but it will be completed in future permits. A current permit will be reduced in scope.
All right, so with respect to this action, because we're not being asked as the council to revisit in any way the code enforcement action or the assessment of the fee. And a year ago when we took up the same property, we deferred it with the understanding that all the improvements would be completed by the end of last year, and we're now 6 months into this year. So what are you recommending with respect to the actual action that's before us with respect to the transfer to the tax roll, if anything different than what's in our item?
Well, I'm recommending that council gives Mr. Kenworthy and staff a chance to reduce that scope, and we have a very good idea of what that is, and within a prescribed amount of time, that's the reduced scope is final.
Okay, but I guess I'm trying to. What is that prescribed at a time? What does that mean for this? We only do the tax roll issue, on a periodic. So I'm asking, what are we actually being asked to act upon with respect to this case?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At this point, we would, based on the history and based on the actions, we would recommend that the council allows the tax roll amount, as is stated in Exhibit A, to move forward with the tax roll lien. I will ensure before this amount is officially assessed that we incorporate any payments that have been made to make sure that it is a true and correct amount.
All right. And does the city, if we adopt this list in this form, does the city manager have the authority, if other to modify properties off the list at the future?
If payments were received in time, I believe that there's a period that the county will give the city through the middle of August or so. So if there's been some correction, we can correct the numbers up to that point. But that would require there to be payments made.
Okay. All right, so you've heard the recommendation and the analysis. What's the council's pleasure? Mr. Ledesma?
I don't have a comment.
All right, is there any further discussion on the item? No? Is there a motion on it? Okay, it's been moved by Mayor Pro Tem Johannesson.
I'll second.
Seconded by Mr. Ledesma. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you. All right, so we encourage you to keep working on this, and hope the resolution can be achieved before the middle of August, it sounds like. All right, item 18 is public hearing and consideration of Resolution 14-14, certifying the list of weed abatement charges, directing that a lien be placed on the subject properties, and requesting inclusion of these charges on the secured tax roll in order that they may be collected in the same manner as general taxes.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. Brian Johnson with Fire. As directed by Resolution 1413, which began the 2014 weed abatement process, the fire department notified owners of properties who had weed nuisances creating a fire hazard. I am here tonight and happy to close the 2014 weed abatement process. All properties requiring weed abatement by the city have been abated, and a list of the charges by parcel has been created, including a 20% special assessment for investigation, boundary determination, clerical, and other costs. It is respectfully recommended that the City Council open a public hearing to receive objections to the charges for the weed abatement service, and it is also respectfully recommended that the City Council adopt Resolution 1414, certifying the list of weed abatement charges, and directs the Yolo County Auditor to add expenses to the individual tax rolls. Thank you.
All right, are there questions at this time? All right, then we'll open the public hearing. No request to speak, but does anyone wish to address the council on this item? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Return to the council for any further question or discussion or motion. It's been moved by Mayor Pro Tem Johannesson, seconded by Councilmember Sandine. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. That brings us to item 19, which is a public hearing to consider the 2013-14 Community Development Block Grant Grantee Performance Report and an amendment to the CDBG Program Income Reuse Plan. Ms. Collis.
Good evening. The city receives Community Development Block Grant or funding, known as CDBG, from the State of California Department of Housing and Community Development. CDBG funds originate from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development and are to be used primarily to improve the lives of lower-income residents in our community. Each year, we're required to submit the grantee performance report to the state that provides an overview of the accomplishments that have been achieved for that fiscal year. In the past, we normally have quite a few grants open at one time. We just happen to have had 3 grants close in the last year, so we actually only have one activity that we were required to report on, and that was in Grant 10 EDEF 7263, which is providing microenterprise business development classes and one-on-one business counseling to low-income owners of very small businesses of 5 employees or less, or to low-income people who would like to start a microenterprise business. 22 people went through classes. I believe both the sessions this year were Spanish-speaking classes. We've actually found that our Spanish-speaking classes are in greater demand than our English classes. Many of these folks do not have come to this country without and don't have a really good understanding of American business practices, of finance, how banking works, how finance works, how to start a business under U.S. rules. So these classes have been very well received, and we get great comments from the attendees. 4 of those folks have already started their business. One of them just recently leased up some space on Jefferson Avenue. So we're very pleased with their progress. Several other activities have occurred this year with CDBG program income that are not necessarily reported in the grantee performance report, but we have done some planning activities, including the Homeless Action Plan and mapping that's occurring in the Washington neighborhood as we work on a plan for that transit-oriented infill development in that neighborhood. We also paid for the Homeless Coordination Project that provides overhead for homeless shelter at 4th and Hope in Woodland, and for a part-time Yolo County homeless coordinator that we share with all the other cities in Yolo County. That concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions.
All right, are there any questions at this time? Mr. Christoph.
Yeah, Louise, I saw in this grant number 10, EDEF, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It says no business loans were completed this year,
Correct.
but yet to go on, it says the microenterprise program has been quite active. But so people are going to the classes, but yet they just haven't qualified for the loan?
We have had several businesses come and talk to us about loans, but none that actually submitted an application. In general, the folks that are attending the micro enterprise classes probably aren't up to the point of needing a business loan. They might need a small amount of cash, but remember that if you use CDBG money for a business loan, you have to create one job for every $35,000, and there's some other rules too. And so most of those folks are starting their tiny businesses out on a shoestring. We hope that someday this will be they'll be growing to the point that they need larger loans, but most of them aren't. It's not really a need for them. The business loans are usually for a little bit larger businesses.
Okay, thank you.
All right, then we're going to open the public hearing on item 19 and have no request to speak. Does anyone wish to address the council on item 19? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing and turn to the council for any further questions or discussion or for a motion.
I'll just if I may make a quick comment. Thank you for the update on that on the program that Mr. Christoph just brought up, and I was reading through it, and it's a valuable service. I'm glad that we were able to provide it. One of the emerging issues coming out of the U.S. Small Business Administration is around credit readiness and around assistance for small, especially minority-owned businesses. And so this is a huge thing that we're able to provide through the granting process. And I'm sure that more support would be coming their way, because I know there's a lot of talks in Washington about how to further these small businesses in specific. Five employees and less. It's an issue at a national level about how to get assistance, particularly to minority-owned business owners. So, I just wanted to laud you for the efforts.
Well, our consultant who is doing the program, Opening Doors, they also provide the MoneyWorks program, which is I believe it originally started with an FDIC program, but that they've based it off of, for financial literacy, primarily for immigrant families. But it can be used for anyone. The materials are available in multiple languages. So a lot of the people that are going through our micro enterprise classes actually went through their MoneyWorks program first, which is on personal financial literacy, and are now moving into business financial literacy. So great strides in some of these households, I think.
Right. So excellent. Thanks. Thanks for the update on it.
Yeah, and if I may, with your permission, Mr. Mayor, just mention that we are not presenting the program income reuse plan as noted in the staff report because HCD was never able to give us the template that was promised. But they do promise it now by August 1st.
All right. So, Mr. Ledesma moves. Is there a second? Second by Mayor Pro Tem Johannesson. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Item 20 is consideration of public hearing and first reading of ordinance 14-6, repealing and adding Chapter 13.04, Article 9 of the City of West Sacramento Municipal Code relating to water conservation. Ms. Benner.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. The proposed changes to the city's water conservation municipal code were presented to council at the June 18th meeting, and we workshopped and discussed those changes. At that meeting, council requested some minor changes to the code and provided general support of the proposed changes. The changes have been made and are reflected in Ordinance 14-6 and are outlined in the staff report. So at this point, I'm just requesting that the council conduct the public hearing on ordinance, waive the first reading, and read by title and number only Ordinance 14-6, repealing, adding Chapter 13.04, Article 9 of the City of West Sacramento Municipal Code relating to water conservation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? All right, then we're going to open the public hearing on item 20. Anyone wish to address the council on this item? So, Mr. Lowell, you're the only member of the public left, so I'm going to close the public hearing. Return to the council for any further discussion. Mayor Pro Tem Johannesson?
Yeah, I think maybe just to follow up the comments I made on the consent item, I think it's really important to continue the outreach to wherever we can. It's communication in West Sacramento is a bit fragmented, so it's just keep pushing this out. And, we haven't come up with a fee schedule yet, which is going to be later, but I know we're all starting to get a lot of questions about this, and are we going to be cited and that type of thing, but really just keep you're doing a good job now in terms of outreach, but just keep it up and let people know that, that we're really trying to conserve here. And I think we're doing a good job, but, just we can't stop the effort of public outreach.
Other comments? Or motion?
I'll move the recommended action.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Moved by Ms. Andine, seconded by Mr. Ledesma. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Item 21 is consideration and award of contract to Data Ticket Incorporated and to provide the processing of code enforcement administrative citations. Mr. Burke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, Council. The purpose of this particular item is to provide information to assist the Council's consideration of a contract for Data Ticket to provide administrative citation processing services. Code enforcement currently has no administrative citation process or procedure. Historically, staff has relied on hearings for continued and repetitive code enforcement action. Hearings are costly to the violation property owner. $500 is the average violation penalty for hearings versus $100 for a first offense citation. Hearings can also be time-consuming for staff and can take up to 3 months to schedule, plus dozens of hours to prepare. Jurisdictions that use administrative citations typically recover at least 50% of enforcement-related costs. West Sacramento code enforcement is at approximately 10%. Jurisdictions that use administrative citations also experience a higher rate of compliance within 1 month of complaint. Roseville's code enforcement program averaged 90% during my tenure there. Approximately 57% of West Sacramento cases are closed within 30 days. One of the first steps of this process is to ensure that any citation is issued reasonably, fairly, and appropriately. Staff goes above and beyond when working with violation property owners to encourage voluntary compliance with the city's municipal code. Enforcement starts through conversation and a courtesy notice. If the property is still within violation after the initial deadline, a second written notice is given. Staff would consider issuing an administrative citation only after the second compliance deadline is passed and the violation remains with no recorded progress. Citations are a discretionary enforcement tool, and there will be no quotas or goals associated with issuing them. The next step in the admin citation procedure is to ensure a written citation is processed timely, accurately, and has clear instructions for mitigation or appeal. Data Ticket provides all three, with the added convenience of a 24-hour access to their website for customer and code enforcement officer citation review. Their cost for services would have almost no impact on the city's budget, considering most of those costs are only charged per written citation. Although they were the original consideration, primarily due to their contract with the West Sacramento Police Department's parking enforcement, staff has reviewed one other third-party provider who didn't quite offer the same services. Staff also considered what it would take to process citations in-house. Staffing and resource limitations would make it difficult to do so accurately or timely, and it keeps officers away from the field where they belong. Data Ticket remains staff's choice, and it's respectfully recommended that council approves the contract. In conclusion, staff believes the recommended action would lead to improved cost recovery, faster case resolution, and possibly less properties going to tax roll in the future. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem Johannesson.
Yes, Mr. Berg, just so we've had experience with Data Ticket on the parking violations. Has there been any feedback on their customer service?
Yes, sir. We've actually sent out a blanket email, if you will, to the California Code Enforcement Association, and we got 14 positive responses. We didn't get any negative responses regarding Data Ticket processing.
I guess my concern is when we off this to a company to do this, we kind of, I mean, we're still responsible. We're the face of what's happening here. We just need to be careful with a company that may be too harsh and or non-responsive, and you know, because I think people aren't really, I mean, you're going to see it's another company that's doing this, but it's going to reflect on our city as well, on how responsive we are to this. So, you know, I want to make sure we keep an eye on that, on how responsive they are to the people that are being fined. And, you know, if there's any kind of resolution, what their customer service is on that angle. It's not necessarily the city to the data ticket, but it's the people that are being fined and how they are being treated.
Thank you,
in the process.
So we know for certain that these are the only two companies that provide these services?
These are the only two companies I could find, sir.
Which is why we chose not to do we have a pretty strong bias towards bidding for a lot of efficiency and accountability and transparency purposes. But was bidding not an option because there's no one in this sector? Or? Between that and also because of the association with the West Sacramento Parking Enforcement, we do get a 5% discount. So it's part of their contract. Other questions? So one other question. I'm not getting convinced about that. I'm a real stickler on the contracting piece. Just done a significant of my graduate work was on what happens when public agencies don't pay enough attention to their contracting practices in this way. And there's always these little hooks to try to get agencies to not do competitive bidding, which ultimately are not in the agency's best interest. So I'm still thinking through that issue. But the other issue is with respect to the appeals. What is Data Ticket's role? It says we contract for a hearing officer at $300 per hearing, but they only charge 85 hours per appeal hearing. We're contracting out the hearing officer as well under this proposal? No, sir. They offer another appeal officer if we so desire, or we can use the one that we have currently. Well, I certainly don't want to use a private appeals service. I mean, the city appoints a hearing officer that acts in a judicial capacity. That's certainly not a function that should be contracted out. But I see that. So I don't. Is that in the proposal? I want to scope out exactly what their role is in an appeal.
basically, the services that are listed as part of that proposal are a la carte. We can select one, we can select all of the different items that they propose. Certainly, the appeal officer is one of many. They have offered to provide an appeal officer, and it'll certainly defer to our appeal officer if we require that.
Now, how could, I don't know, just a question. How could we do that? I mean, the municipal code makes specific reference to our hearing officer, and in the process of code enforcement appeals, how could we?
Well, the hearing officer is appointed by the city. We could elect to, I think what they're offering is you could elect to appoint their hearing officer in lieu of one that's been separately appointed. I share some reluctance to go down that path. I think using them for processing makes perfect sense. I'm not as comfortable with using them as part of the appeals process.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm definitely not. I mean, a private system of justice, I don't. Our hearing officer, I mean, it's not an overly burdensome job, but it's always been a resident of our community that has both legal expertise and, has the legitimacy of being a neighbor in the greater sense of that word, that provides an impartial but community-oriented perspective and lens on what are often very, as we heard earlier, they're often very human cases that require that you have not a jury, a judge of your peers, essentially, to be able to take a look at them. So I definitely think the hearing officer piece should not be contracted. Mr. Ledet, you're turning your mic off. Any other discussion?
I do have a question.
Mr. Ledesma.
Thank you. I'm just looking at the terms of the contract. So this is a 5-year contract that we can, in the term, I guess, in the scope of we're learning and outsourcing this service, are we going to be using any, or will you be considering using any metrics, and Mr. Johannesson brought up the customer service as one sort of consideration of making sure the vendor performs as we expect. So I'm just trying to outline from your perspective, do you have any anticipated metrics to look at to make sure they're performing as is? And I know there's only 2, and there is a contracting issue, but we're signing up based on this 5 years. It's just a long relationship. So I just want to know if you plan to have that, you might consider that.
Yes, absolutely.
What might the measures be that you're looking at? How do we know this is going to work in our favor, other than being able to automate and manage the ticketing process and the payment processing?
Well, we currently, I haven't currently put together any kind of metrics regarding that particular issue, but I am putting together some specific implementation items that will need to be met before we can even get to that point. And I can certainly include that just in terms of feedback. I know they send monthly updates in terms of responses for written administrative citations, so it certainly wouldn't be beyond our scope to request copies of that in any way.
Right. I think that would be helpful to know that you have that lens, because I think part of the concern of not going the contracting route is that it's open for it would be open again at a certain point given. So with this, we have no knowledge of sort of we're tying ourselves in for 5 years, and whether the scope of that contract changes or something happens at the vendor that we want to cut ties with it, all those sorts of things come into mind for me in terms of vendor management and risk of vendors. So I think it would be helpful that we have some sort of process in mind as you enter into this, in terms of they're obviously giving you a number of things and looking through their proposal or the contract of what they're going to provide by way of service. But I think just having that lens about how we're going to manage it, how we renew it, how we know that it's operating as we agreed. From my own personal experience, knowing that you have vendors around for 5 years, things may change in a year. You decide to use them differently. The actual contract you have should be amended to reflect that. So again, those are the kind of things I'm thinking about when looking at this contract.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Further discussion? Ms. Andine?
I'm thinking about your comments, Mayor, about our contracting with different agencies with a kind of public process. And so I also understand that we have in our municipal code that bidding requirements don't apply where there's a cooperative purchasing agreement. So it's just one of those kind of gray questions. Is 5% a discount? Is that it's just like what's the benefit? I agree. I think it would be helpful to your work to have help in this regard. So I think the idea, the concept of having assistance is like contracting out a big portion of this work. So I'm not opposed to that. I just am contemplating your comment about the way in which we publicly make these decisions, and do we know that this is the best kind of cost or price we could get? And I can't answer that. So.
Yeah, which to me is, that's the point of the competitive bidding, is to get other people to say, no, we could do it for cheaper and better. And then there's the challenge that we face with a lot of our contracting arrangements where the next time it comes up, we say, well, and we're going to give extra points because this one has familiarity with our city because they already work with us. And so we contract with them again, and then again, and again, and again. And we then get trapped because no one else starts to bid after a while because it looks rigged. And then we're essentially stuck in a monopoly relationship. So there's just a lot of dangers to it, and so it's not. This one is. I think I can be okay with this one. It's just that it's the approach that's common. It's endemic in the public sector, which is if we can find a way out of competitive bidding, we will. Which is kind of how I read that part of the staff report was. Well, we're allowed to because of the discount, and we're allowed to because of the multi-agency purchase. But that's really not the point. The point is why should we? What's the policy reason not to in terms of the outcomes, and then the other things are there in order to allow that assessment to get made by the city manager or when it's appropriate by us. So I flag it pretty continuously. Mr. Johannesson does too often, but flag it just simply to remind that competitive bidding is not something to be avoided if you possibly can. It's not always you shouldn't just do it either just because the mayor harps about it. But it should be. We should be paying attention to both the short and the long-term implications when we take shortcuts on the contracting piece, which sometimes make perfectly good sense. But we should be thinking through the larger contracting relationships that happen and what their implications are over time. So in this case, if it's really the case that there really just aren't providers to bid on it, we shouldn't go through with a fake competitive bidding process for which no one's going to bid. Just to go through the motions. All right. Any other discussion? Right. So, is there a motion on this with excising the parts of the agreement and the contract with respect to the hearing officer? Please.
Well, as Mr. Burke said, we're not required under the contract to use them. It is a service that they provide. I think council can simply give direction to staff that you're not comfortable using this company to provide the hearing services, and you'd like to continue to use the city-appointed hearing officer. I don't think you need to revise the contract to take that out.
Okay. I guess partly I don't want to be on record as voting to contract out the hearing officer, even as a matter of authority.
Yeah. You can certainly give direction to revise the contract to take out the portions that refer to that particular service.
Right.
So if you approve it substantially in the form with the direction to staff to make those changes and authorize the manager or you, Mr. Mayor, to sign it, you can do that.
All right. Council comfortable with that? Okay.
I feel comfortable with that. And I'm under the impression there's only 2 firms that do this kind of work.
I could only locate 2, sir.
You could locate 2?
Yes.
Okay. Because I do think it is important that we have a comparison. At least if it's just written in here, and it says Company A, which is the company that this particular data ticket charges this. Company B, ABC ticket data charges this. I like to see at least a comparison. Okay?
Yes.
Requirement that we not use. Correction, that there would be some mechanism. Evaluate this. I'm sorry. And to evaluate and manage this vendor so that we know it's succeeding in whatever ways that you direct. That's just direction.
All right.
There's the motion.
There's the motion. Is there a second? All right, it's been moved by Mr. Ledesma and seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Johannesson. Seeing no further discussion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
None.
All right, hearing none, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Item
Thank you.
22 is consideration of funding applications for the Regional Active Transportation Program. Mr. Lucan.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. Tonight, before you, you have the consideration of two grant applications under the SACOG ATP program. Earlier this year, staff submitted and the council approved two projects under Caltrans's ATP statewide program. Those projects are currently under consideration by the state, and we're hoping to hear back very soon on the success of those. The two items that you have before you tonight are under SACOG's separate allocation for the active transportation program, and we have two applications for your consideration tonight. One is a citywide bike lane gap closure, and the second one is the West Capitol Avenue Paseo project. The first project is I'll describe in my presentation, is a gap closure project. The City Council approved in 2013 our Bikeway, Pedestrian, and Trails Master Plan. If you will, these are a number of projects which are low-hanging fruit in our Bike Ped Master Plan, where we are simply adding two existing bike lane systems throughout the city, filling gaps and closures, which is a high priority of the SACOG system. In this next slide, in the next slide here, you'll see a summary of those items that were on that map. Those items are all bike lanes and or Sharrow projects, which add 10.2 miles to our existing bike lane system. It will actually increase our current bike lanes approximately 25% in the city, so it's a very significant amount, even though it's a gap closure project. The allocation between the north part of the city and the south part of the city is 54% of them are in the north part of the city and 46% are in the south part of the city. These really consist mainly of striping and very, very limited improvements. They do not require any right-of-way improvements whatsoever, and can be implemented very quickly after we go through a small design process and competitive bidding process. With this project, sorry, I'm getting used to the mouse here. I haven't done this in a while. The next steps in this program would be obviously submitting the application by the 29th, hopefully getting funding of our application pretty quickly. We would do some public outreach with some of these bike lane projects. Some of them involve working with property owners in terms of parking removal, one of which I'll mention on Linden Road, where we would there's potential for parking, and we would want to work with property owners and residents in those areas to make sure that we're doing it in the best manner possible. We would then go through, or roughly at the same time, design of those and mapping of those improvements and environmental review. We would then take that design document, put it out to bid, do it through the Public Works bidding process, and go into construction relatively quickly. Get this eventually here. Second project that we are seeking council approval of relates to a number of different things, or a number of different meetings that the council and other advisory bodies in the city have had related to the Grand Gateway project, and also the HUD Livable Communities project be underway in the Washington Specific Plan area. And what we have proposed here, based upon council guidance at the last workshop, is a interim project which will achieve a number of objectives in the short term, of providing a pedestrian dedicated paseo from the intersection of Garden and West Capitol Avenue eastward to 5th Street and West Capitol Avenue, using one of the lanes that currently exists there now along West Capitol Avenue as a dedicated bike lane, and then the other lane, the northerly lane, as either a eastbound or westbound traffic lane. Eventually, per the council direction, we would look at converting this entirely to a pedestrian and bicycle walkway, but in the interim, until a number of things happen, including development of projects within the area, staff recommends that this interim improvement be implemented to allow more activity, more pedestrian access in the area in coordination with the Grand Gateway and Washington Specific Plan process. None of the items in this project would be throwaway if we went ahead and closed that at some point in the future when the time is right. The improvements could be added to. There would be no throwaway costs. We have done skip this slide here. This is, sorry. And now it doesn't want to show up here. Oh, there it goes. Well, I guess it shows up in pieces here. I have to practice my PowerPoint skills here in the future. Anyway, we've done extensive outreach for this project, including meeting with the property owners in the area, Welcome Grove, Rayleigh's, the family that owns the what is commonly termed as the Rayleigh's Annex project. We've had a number of workshops here with our Washington's HUD Livable Communities project group, including actual meetings and comment cards and other types of outreach. All of which are included a discussion of this proposed improvement. What we still have to do on this project, and we're presented with an opportunity for a grant, but we aren't quite finished with the full analysis of this project, and that is from a traffic standpoint. We have to take a look at whether it is beneficial to do a one-way eastbound or one-way westbound, and we're currently finalizing analysis that is being done by Fair and Peers, the consultant working on the HUD Livable Communities project, to determine which is the best and most advantageous from a traffic standpoint, and then we'll work with property owners to make that final recommendation, which we will bring back to the council for consideration. Oh, geez. Okay. The next steps for this, somewhat similar to the last grant, we would submit the grant application by the 29th. We would complete the traffic analysis to determine which is the most preferential option, one way in either the eastbound or westbound direction. At the same time, there's a process already in place to go through the Planning Commission and council consideration of the Washington HUD Livable Communities project that would take place. Towards the end of that, hopefully we will receive a funding award for this grant application. We would then bring back to the council the final design of this, before we get to the bidding process, just for the council's consideration of the final project. And then we would go through it and design the project, do environmental review, and get it ready for a project bid package that would then go into eventual construction. Staff has a recommendation to change slightly from the staff report in terms of our recommended action. Recommended actions 1 and 2 remain the same, which would be to amend the bicycle master plan to include the Paseo project, which is not currently in the plan. It has come up later in association with the Grand Gateway project. approve Resolution 14-44 that would approve the grant amounts as shown, and also give staff some latitude in terms of 25%, as we've done in the past, in case during this process, as we get to the grant application, allows us to amend the amount up to 25%. And then lastly, in item number 3, which is where the change is being recommended, staff, upon further reflection, feels that it's more appropriate to have this money, and recommends that this funding for the matching part of the, and in this case, it's for the gap closure portion of it, the $110,000 come from the General Facilities Fund, or Fund 208, as opposed to the Fund 106 or Measure G funding. With that, I'll conclude my presentation and answer any questions you might have.
Mr. Ledesma.
Thank you. And I'll be looking for PowerPoint classes for you, Mike.
Yes, sorry. Or at least how to use the remote.
So I have a couple of questions. First of all, on the citywide bike lane gap, at least that part of the project that project that you're proposing. So, is the, well, let me step back. So the active transportation program that we're going to from SACOG, is it focused specifically on these type of bicycle networks and pedestrian networks?
It allows us to look at more comprehensive trails, such as what we have submitted in the past, such as the Clarksburg Branch Line Trail or the Sycamore Trail, and it also allows for gap closure. We took a look at what is ripe, if you will, in our bike ped master plan, and the thing that came up kind of loud and clear in our staff's review of the plan is that we have these number of gaps that need to be filled, and we thus make a very large dent in our pedestrian master plan by increasing, by about 10.2 miles the amount of bike lanes.
Which I'm fully supportive of.
Right.
I'm just asking in terms of addressing some specific needs, and I'm not trying to cram stuff into the last minute. But on what you have down on one part of it, I'm not sure if you're getting this detailed, or on the gap closure is along Lake Washington at Town Center and basically the trail. There's I think that's the gap you're trying to close there.
Mm-hmm.
It's in red.
Yes.
So there's no bike lane basically crossing over the.
Correct.
Okay. So, but part of that is a road issue, isn't it? In terms of there's no shoulder there, there's nothing. So I'm trying to understand. Will part of that fix be will be to the road as well to make it more safe for bicyclists to cross that area?
In that case, it will be utilizing, if I'm correct, the portion of that is in a future expansion area of the road. Is that the area that you're talking about?
No, it's right at the crossing of at the Clarksburg Branch Trail, coming from the Nugget crossing, and then it's on the north side of the.
On Stonegate.
Not on Stonegate. On Lake Washington.
Okay.
So it just the road narrows down at the crossing.
Yes.
And one of the more frequent complaints or feedback I get about that grade is that it's not very safe for bicyclists crossing at that grade, because cars and everything gets squeezed as it goes over the crossing. And I know we're adding a bike lane, but I think there's more of a fix needed there on.
We're kind of working on that in two parts. One is looking at where the trail, there is an interim roadway in that specific location, and we need to extend the markings, if you will, out there so that people essentially approach the roadway for a crossing, and they're not right now they're set way back from where the crossing actually starts. So moving that out towards the street until such time that the roadway is improved. We're not proposing, widening the roadway or anything in that.
That's
location.
my question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we are looking at that in other areas.
Yes.
Correct. Okay. And on the other question I had to do with the Paseo, which I'm supportive of. and you sort of answered it in your presentation, because we were talking about it through the exercise with the Gateway project there and what it might be, and now it's in front of us as we're going to try to fund the project that we haven't finalized yet. Is that basically where we are, or?
Well, we're presented with this opportunity for under the ATP program, and staff is recommending this interim improvement. With the final project being a full closure of that roadway. Because we don't know the development potential of Welcome Grove and some of the other developments, staff feels that the full closure at this time is premature because you wouldn't have the activity that you need in there. You'd essentially be creating a void of activity by a full closure at this point in time, and Public Works, Police, and Fire have a concern about that doing the full improvement at this time. So as a interim measure, and at the same time not throwing away any improvements.
And that's kind of my concern, is that as we go toward that these grants are great funding mechanisms, but I think we at least I have an idea that where I want that to be, and I hate to use a good grant and get us somewhere and we're going to discard it in 2 years when we do have a development opportunity.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of it is striping again. It's delimiters for the bike lane itself, so you have an actual separation of the bike lane. It is some median improvements, and it really does solve the awful issue we have with that 5th and West Capitol intersection,
Yes.
because it allows the removal of that signal light as part of this project to make the bikeway work. So it's not ideal. I mean, if we could have the eventual project.
I think, and I think my perspective is if it got that far, because it's a mess of an intersection right there because of that light.
Yeah.
That to me would be worth it in and of itself. But again, if the improvements you're looking at aren't going to be bluntly wasted because of another, I'm supportive of that. Again, but we haven't really delved into that detail yet, and so that's the part. It's a bit of chicken or the egg here, because the egg is the funding at this point that could be available. So,
but Mike, we would come back with the design details, including the removal of that signal.
Yeah, as I mentioned, City Manager makes a good point. Is in our scope, in our next steps process, you would actually be considering that the Planning Commission and the City Council would be considering that design, and you'd have that opportunity before we got the actual funding.
Right.
So you could make some final adjustments, and we can before we actually design the project.
And because of that process, and if I may, Mr. Mayor, continue on. You've done some outreach to the community. Are they clear on this concept that we want to make that to pedestrian, bicycle, and because you've gone out to them, I'm just concerned. Are we circumventing that process? Is this what they're expecting?
Yeah, I think the concept of a bike corridor is receptive to the community group that we've been working with. Some of the property owners do have some reservation, in terms of what's kind of the interim step. We've reached out to them, and they've again, they're kind of supportive of the endpoint, but how we get to the endpoint, they're not sure. So, but we'll continue to work with them, and because of we have, with these types of grants, we have 3 years to implement them, and so staff feels comfortable that 3-year period, we won't find out funding for a while, and then that 3-year period, once we do find out of funding, we can work with those property owners to design something that's acceptable to them. We'll be past that process where the councils has made a decision on the street network and the Washington HUD livable communities component to that. So we can wait till all that is completed before we finalize the design of this. It's just things are a little out of sync because of the funding.
Yeah, I understand. I just want to make sure we're not doing anything to create a perception that we're bypassing. And if the funding's available and we can get it in the pipeline, so to say, and work towards that end and let people know conceptually where we're headed, I think they'd be accepting of that as long as we kind of. My question was, have they at least have the notion that this is coming?
Yes.
And it wouldn't be a total surprise that nobody told us we were doing a
Yes,
SAO, and nobody told us we were doing an interim step.
They're aware of it. I would say they're just not in total agreement with it yet.
Okay.
Mr. Christoph.
Yeah, Mike, the Fund 106, that's always been sort of our catch-all fund. Whatever monies we had, we could put in there for infrastructure and for other kinds of things. So what's 108?
So the first two bike ped projects, under the Caltrans program, we recommended funding out of 106 to the tune of $125,000. This opportunity, if you will, came up for funding, and so because there's a lot of constraints on Fund 106, we felt maybe a better or more appropriate source for that would be to use the General Facilities Fund, which is Fund 208.
Oh, 208.
208.
Oh, I thought it was 108. Okay, 208. And you think that funding a bicycle lane is a better use of the monies that we do have saved, and that's the highest and best use? I mean, I always thought it was going to be a little bit more. I thought it was going to be for, some Gucci project on the waterfront or some project over by, I thought it was going to be.
That's 106.
Yeah, that's what 106 is. That's why we
106.
That's why we are recommending moving it to 208, because of that exact reason that 106, although we put some money in the other projects for bike ped, it really should be saved for those catalyst projects that you mentioned.
Okay, well,
so that's
I
why
just
we're
wanted to
recommending
make sure
that move.
that was the case. Thank you.
Yes.
Ms. Sandine?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Lucan. I'm supportive of these going forward, both the grant applications and due in 13 days, I see, which is fast. And I think anytime we can leverage, 12% to get 100%, to do that match, I think that's appropriate. When I looked at the gap closures, and I know I was reading carefully the staff report about the project targeting gaps in the network that did not require additional right-of-way or were part of a larger ongoing project, not to delay implementation of the project. I just wish I could call the citywide bike lane gap A or something, gap closure A, because I feel like we've done a tremendous amount of work, and I'm really pleased that we're building out our bike infrastructure. It just seems like there's still so much more. So I hope we have other opportunities in the future, especially in Southport. It's really hard to traverse as a bicyclist Jefferson, Southport Parkway, and to try to make bicycling commuting work, because it's a bit dicey. So I think these are tremendous steps forward, and I hope we're successful with this grant, but then I hope in the future we continue to build out the infrastructure, and I know that's in the grand plan, but don't forget folks way down in the south.
It is the next grouping. Admittedly, is going to be a bit more challenging because we have right-of-way as part of that, and that is an eligible expense under these programs. It's just it makes a simple project a multi-year endeavor, and there's lots of processes that we have to go through to acquire that right-of-way in an appropriate manner with federal dollars. And so, again, this is kind of a low-hanging fruit so that we can make a big dent right away.
Yeah. No, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Johannesson?
Yeah, Mike, I'm in support of these as well. As with the Paseo, will we be getting back just specifically what these bike improvements are going to be? Or is this more of an administrative, in terms of, the gap closures?
I'm sorry.
Will we be getting back the design of
yes.
what these are? Yeah.
Yes. We'll have to put these out to Public Works bid, and at that time, and we can bring back interim steps as well if that's the council's pleasure. To bring back design or put those in the newsletter or something like that to get the council involved in that process. But yeah, absolutely, you will not. We cannot finalize a construction contract without the council's approval.
Okay, thanks.
So thank you, and I agree with all the comments that have been made. I just on the gap closure issue in particular, there were. And one sort of overall comment, and then then four specific ones I wanted to query you about. Maybe you may not know them right off the top of your head, but whether they fall in this right-of-way challenge, because they're kind of significant backbone gaps. And so I'll just say the four of them. One is the connection between Jefferson and Marshall, the bike lanes that run south on Jefferson. They stop about a block ahead of Marshall and don't get to Marshall, and so the two major components of the bike lane network in that part of in Southport are not connected. A second is what you might call the beer district gaps. There's two of them. One is Industrial Boulevard, where the bike lane ends at Terminal and then recommences at Harbor, but there's nothing in between, and so you can't. There's no protected. Well, none of the paths are protected, but there's no bike facility between either the State Streets, West Morrocks, Old West Sacramento neighborhood, or Southport, and the areas that are intended to be connected to the industrial areas. Similarly, the connection between Park Boulevard, this is a much smaller piece, which is heavily challenged by the rail line that's there, but there's no connection between Park Boulevard, the end of Park Boulevard, and then Industrial Boulevard itself. It's a couple feet, and maybe a little bit more than a couple feet. It's a few feet. But it's definitely, and it's becoming more and more used in part because of this this brewery district. Then the last is the longest one, and that's the gap that exists in historic Washington. Really, there's no north-south connection between Sacramento Avenue, for example, or Lighthouse, and then the West Capitol Tower Bridge section to the south of it. I mention that because. Other than the two backbones on Sacramento Avenue and Jefferson, there's really no bike facilities in Bright or Broderick at all, and so the connectivity to, and they're hardest to do because of right-of-way issues. Right, there's no large arterials either that don't have folks' houses right up on them. So it's a big challenge to accomplish them intermixed inside the neighborhood in the way that they are in some Southport neighborhoods where we built bike lanes at the front end. But to the extent to which folks figure out, okay, I'll just bike down Hardy or on my own, I'll figure that out. But but I still need to get somewhere. And I can't get down 5th Street or 3rd Street, and 5th is still a relatively new street, and 3rd is a major part of our waterfront redevelopment. And so it seems like those north-south connections in that area are a major gap problem, which I hope we didn't compound when we agreed to give street parking to Capitol Yards. But that issue around the lack of any north-south connectivity in Washington and Broderick, I think, is a significant gap. And that's really the second level question, which was around that. What's our strategy in this, if we have one, to deal with the far north, the historic neighborhoods of the city, balanced against the significant amount of bike lane that we're proposing to create here in the industrial section of the city, right? Both leading into Riverside Parkway, Riverside Industrial Park, and into the far west part of the industrial city, where those are the two longest extensions of bike facilities that are in this proposal. So I know that was a lot, but
sure. So maybe to respond to some of these, the four projects that you mentioned, maybe I can take them in reverse order. The connection to historic, Washington, to Sacramento Avenue, if you will. That is the project that we're focusing in on, that to connect Bright to the lower part of the city, is the Sycamore Trail project. And the northerly part of that project is probably one of the most challenging projects in the entire bike bed master plan, because we have to go underneath actually two railroads, the UP Main Line and the Sierra Northern's rail line, and And one of the thoughts, because of the YOLO Regional Rail project that's going on currently, that it might have, staff felt that it would be prudent to not do that northerly half and maybe potentially eliminate one of the railroad crossings, the Sierra Northern Railroad crossing, which would be no longer needed with the YOLO Regional Rail project. And so we refocused our efforts, if you will, on the southerly part of the Sycamore Trail Phase 2 and 3. Phase 1, 2, and 3 instead of that northerly phase. And you're correct, in the Brighton Broderick area, we've met with a number of groups up there, and the right-of-way issue on a lot of those local streets is very significant, where you have not only houses in some circumstances, but you have utility pole relocations, and you also have very significant masonry gates and kind of enclosures, if you will, of those properties, and those projects are going to be very, very hard to implement, which is why Sycamore Trail is so important, because that gets us off of those streets and provides another viable access. The other projects, maybe just to group them, all require right-of-way. We looked at the connection to the Beer District in several aspects, all of which require right-of-way. The Park Boulevard requires, although it's short, does require right-of-way. And again, that's kind of why we, at this point, are recommending this list, is because it's in fact something we can implement quickly and makes a big impact upon our.
And what about 3rd and 5th in Washington neighborhood?
The reason we didn't bring those forward is because those are of considerable discussion in the HUD Livable Communities project, and the team for that project, which includes Chris Doherty, our bike coordinator, is looking at potential changes in the treatment of those streets and bringing a project forward, and it's premature in staff's mind at this point in time.
All right, so
there is a definite need there, but the strategy is to use the HUD Livable Communities as the avenue to make that recommendation.
All right, that sounds fine. I want to flag it because it got raised in terms of the Paseo project as well. And it's tempting. We in a lot of our urban redevelopment, we've been able to think about projects as being long-term projects, right? So let's do the bridge district, and let's make sure we do it right the first time that we do it. These are places where people already live. And more people are moving, by the month under the development that we're already engaging in. And so waiting for the perfect project in areas like the Paseo or on 3rd or 5th, we need to balance that against the expectations and the lack of parking that we're building, and the other policies that we've adopted, that people need to have these facilities now. And they serve a broader neighborhood than just what's on them at the moment. So I hear and agree with the concerns about the Paseo as well, but I also, it's that Paseo project, that corridor is not simply about those property owners. It's about all the neighborhoods around it that have been, some who've been there forever and some who are just starting, and that connectivity needs to be affirmative and occur in addition to the traffic light. But the same thing on 3rd and 5th. So I'm not arguing for just go whole hog on every opportunity that there is instantly, but we need to balance those issues and be careful not to treat these as long-term development areas when they're live now, even if the specific block isn't. And so as we hear from Parks and Police and Public Works about that stretch, I think we have to balance that with the issues around its circulation effects for the Washington area, the Bridge District, the downtown as well. Beyond whether or not it's the actual two blocks are themselves developable in the near term, that place, the corridor needs to be activated in a way that actually works for the neighborhood. Okay, anything else on this one? Great. All right, is there a motion then? The revised recommendation based on the Fund 206? 208, sorry.
I'll move the recommended action with that change.
All right, it's been moved by Ms. Sandine, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Johannesson. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you. All right, that brings us to council calendar. Actually, before we take these up, Mr. Richardson reminded me I wanted to, we didn't acknowledge at the beginning of our meeting that one of our members was acknowledged regionally as one of Sacramento Region's Women Who Mean Business, which was a big honor, and I think the first West Sacramento to be honored in such a way. So congratulations, Councilmember Sandine. All right, City Manager, the council calendar, sorry. Ms. Richardson.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to bring to your attention, there is a memo on your DS about the some of the precautions that our police and fire department are taking on the great horror camp out this weekend that we heard about this evening. Also on the 21st of this month, that's not on your calendar, Councilmember Johannesson is convening the homeless stakeholders meeting, which is going to take place at the police department at 5 p.m. on the 21st. And then again on the 24th, we're having another Dickin dinner, and I believe Mayor Cabaldan is our celebrity
I'm
chef.
busy chopping celery right now.
Okay.
It's with Ernesto from Mayahuel.
Right. Okay. And then just want to remind the council that August 5th is National Night Out.
All right, any questions on the calendar? City Manager report?
I guess.
Oh, Mr. Kristoff, sorry.
One question I do have, Carol, and that is the process that we have gone through on this great horror camp out. It seems like we've missed something. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if we've followed all of the procedures that we're supposed to follow. I mean, we knew that, or I would assume that someone would know that there's going to be a red flag with this. And for us to not have any appeal process, or for us not to even be able to hear it and make our comments, it just sort of seems like it's out of place. There's something really not right.
Well, if I may, we learned about the event through a billboard. That's the first we heard about it, and then we got the special event permit. Talked to our attorney in terms of what we could do to deny that permit. We've spent a lot of time. Police department has spent a lot of time in doing due diligence on previous events. We're working with them closely. Fire has put a lot of time into this. Building has done as well. It's a one-time event, and as the council discussed earlier, the context of that event is something that we didn't look at. We looked at the issue of security, alcohol use, ADA requirements, parking.
But maybe to the broader question, the notion of do we I don't think there's been a question where did the departments, have they done their job appropriately? But is our ordinance and our process, does it have all the appropriate elements to it? And I actually didn't, I never thought about the fact that our process doesn't have an appeal mechanism for anyone except the applicant. If you wanted to object to an event occurring, there's no process for that to happen. And which isn't that staff did anything wrong. Our ordinance doesn't provide for that. But that's the sort of thing we ought to take, that perhaps we ought to examine. The other question about this property in particular has a lot of events at it, right? And so how special are they? And is the property evolving into something different?
That's the discussion we had today. Is it now a commercial event?
So I think those sorts of, I agree with Mr. Crow. It's frustrating in the moment because things 3 days from now, and we really have no recourse. I mean, we haven't discussed whether we would want to, but that we should. I think we should, at the appropriate time, take stock of what lessons we might learn about this project, this event, and its implications and consequences have raised for how we might reexamine our own policies.
With a special look at that property. It is an agricultural area. We're handling it as a one-time event, but it appears that it's more than one time. It's frequent throughout the year.
So, okay, but yeah, I mean, there's also, I think the generic question around how, because it could be any other property too. So I think this property is raising that issue, but it's really more generalized because we've tried to construct an ordinance that encourages events generally, in a broad sense, and maybe we ought to revisit that now that we're that we have more of them. That's all. But not to try to open the debate here, but simply to flag it as an issue to bring forward. But there's nothing we can do for the weekend, even if we wanted to.
Yeah, I mean that was what I wanted to really sort of get at, because this is going to be July 18th and then again July 19th. So really there's 2 days. They say 1 day, but it's really 2 days. And when it goes from like 8 o'clock at night until 4 o'clock in the morning, I have some concerns. And so, I mean, it's something that I would like to look at in the future so that we can look at these special permits. But anyway, that was, I hope there's nothing that happens, because I mean, I realize staff and your departments and the council, we've done a lot of things to make some real positive marks that are really being noticed by a number of people outside the community. And they're making comments to us, or to me at least, that, my goodness, you're really doing some good things. And they are really feeling, and this is the kind of thing that could blow it. At least I think it could. Has the potential. I don't say it will, but it could. And I want to make sure that I'm part of the decision-making process, that we get to think about that. So anyway.
Would you like a workshop on the whole special event application process and what we currently require, and the issue of a public notice of events is not a current requirement, but we could raise that? I mean, is that...
Well, I guess, I think this is just happening right now. We've had a council just as I don't want to, rather than make a specific request at this point, but simply to, I think you've heard some, and the others can't say anything because of the Brown Act issues. So rather than take direction from a couple of comments, as the manager to take a look at these issues on your own, and lessons that you might draw from it that you might recommend, if any, for future council consideration. All right. Was that the city manager report, or
that will be?
Okay. City attorney report. Staff direction from members of the council.
That was mine.
I led a regional session on EV, electric vehicle, public charger a couple of months ago, and it's the issues that we're having at this one with the famous Volt that is not Councilmember Sandeen's car, that parks there constantly. I think it's really not an issue in terms of this space, but as we ought to think about how, and we've discussed this before, but think about how we develop an effective policy that encourages the charging, both now and as we build future chargers, to be used to incentivize the kind of appropriate behavior that we're trying to achieve. Because simply providing a parking space and a charger for a single vehicle certainly wasn't the intent with this one, but we don't want to replicate that as we move forward. And because of the control that we have over the charging equipment itself, we actually have quite a few options. So this is obviously not an urgent matter, but as we think about an EV pricing strategy and stuff like that over time, we ought to be taking a look at that. So, okay, any future agenda item requests? None. All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Been moved by everyone and seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Johannesson. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Meeting is adjourned.